Professor Eleanor Ainsworth, a historian of considerable renown, found herself yet again wrestling with the shadows of the past. Her focus, the werewolf trials of medieval Europe, a topic often relegated to the realm of sensationalism and superstition. Eleanor, however, suspected something far more complex lay beneath the surface. It wasn't enough to dismiss these events as mass hysteria. The social, political, and even psychological undercurrents demanded closer inspection. Eleanor often began her lectures by dismantling the romanticized image of the werewolf found in modern fiction. She traced the origins of the myth, from ancient folklore to the evolving legal definitions of lycanthropy during the medieval period. It was a long and winding road, fraught with misinterpretations and cultural biases. The real work, however, began not in the lecture hall but within the hallowed halls of Europe's ancient archives. It was here, amidst the dust and the parchment, that Eleanor hoped to uncover the truth. Fortunately, Eleanor had a vital ally in her quest, Thomas Berger, a young archivist whose knowledge of medieval documents was unparalleled. Thomas possessed a rare combination of meticulousness and genuine enthusiasm, a trait invaluable for navigating the labyrinthine world of historical records. Together, Eleanor and Thomas meticulously combed through countless trial transcripts, ecclesiastical records, and local chronicles, seeking patterns and anomalies that might shed light on the werewolf trials. The initial findings were intriguing, albeit complex. While a genuine belief in lycanthropy undoubtedly existed, the accusations often seemed rooted in pre-existing social tensions, land disputes, and even political rivalries. The werewolf trials, it appeared, were rarely about werewolves alone. One sweltering afternoon in a French archive, Thomas stumbled upon a particularly intriguing manuscript, the trial record of a peasant woman accused of transforming into a wolf and attacking livestock. The details were lurid, the accusations vehement, yet something about the testimony felt off. Eleanor, upon examining the manuscript, noticed several inconsistencies. The handwriting seemed to change abruptly in certain sections, suggesting possible alterations or additions. Moreover, some of the legal terminology used was anachronistic, hinting at a later forgery. "Thomas, this could be a crucial piece of the puzzle," Eleanor exclaimed, her voice laced with excitement. "If this manuscript is indeed a fabrication, it could reveal a deliberate attempt to manipulate the narrative surrounding these trials." Thomas nodded in agreement. "It also raises the question, why? Who would benefit from perpetuating the myth of the werewolf, and what were their motives?" The answer, Eleanor knew, lay buried deeper within the archives, hidden amongst the countless documents that held the secrets of the past. Their journey into the shadows of doubt had only just begun. And this manuscript was the key. Eleanor arrived in Marburg, Germany, the chill October air biting at her cheeks. The university town, steeped in history, felt like the perfect starting point for her research. She knew the archives here held secrets, whispers of a past shrouded in fear and superstition. The Staatsarchiv Marburg loomed before her, a testament to centuries of record-keeping. Its stone facade, weathered by time, held within its walls the stories of countless lives, including those accused of the most heinous of crimes, lycanthropy. Inside, Thomas Berger, the archivist assigned to assist Eleanor, awaited her. He was a meticulous young man, dedicated to preserving the past. His knowledge of the archive's holdings was encyclopedic. "Professor Ainsworth, it's an honor. I've prepared a selection of documents pertaining to the werewolf trials in Hesse during the 16th and 17th centuries," Thomas said, his voice polite and eager. The documents were a mix of trial transcripts, ecclesiastical records detailing accusations of heresy, and local chronicles that painted a vivid picture of the communities gripped by fear. Alina carefully unfolded a trial transcript, the ink faded but still legible. The words leaped off the page, tales of accusations, confessions, and brutal punishments. The weight of history pressed down on her. This passage is particularly interesting, Professor. It details the Church's stance on lycanthropy as a form of heresy, linking it to demonic pacts, Thomas explained, his finger tracing the Latin text. Alina paused, considering the implications. The blending of religious dogma with folk beliefs created a potent and dangerous mix. It provided the framework for persecution. Thomas pointed to the map. It's also important to consider the political landscape. Many of these accusations arose in border regions, where tensions between different principalities were high. The challenges of interpreting these medieval documents were considerable. The language was archaic, the handwriting often difficult to decipher, and the biases of the scribes evident. But within those limitations lay valuable insights. As Alina looked out the window, she knew the task ahead was daunting. Unraveling the truth behind the werewolf trials required not just historical analysis, but empathy, critical thinking, and a willingness to confront the darkest aspects of human nature. The day ended with both Alina and Thomas immersed in their work. The archives, with its silent stories, had cast its spell, drawing them deeper into the shadows of doubt. The origins of the werewolf legend were as murky as the deepest forests of ancient Europe. Alina traced the roots back to pre-Christian Germanic and Celtic traditions, where shape-shifting was a potent symbol of power and transformation, not necessarily evil. Thomas, ever the meticulous archivist, unearthed references to wolf cults and warrior societies, who adopted wolf-like attributes, blurring the lines between man and beast. These primal beliefs formed a foundation upon which later, darker interpretations would be built. Isabel posited that the raw, untamed energy associated with the wolf resonated with deep-seated human instincts, both primal and destructive. This primal association, she argued, made the werewolf a potent symbol of suppressed desires and anxieties. The integration of these ancient beliefs into the medieval Christian cosmology was a complex process. The Church, struggling to assert its authority, demonized pagan practices, casting shape-shifting as a pact with the devil. The werewolf became not just a beast, but a heretic. Medieval bestiaries, compilations of animal lore both real and fantastical, further cemented the werewolf's monstrous image. These books, widely circulated, portrayed werewolves as creatures of insatiable hunger and uncontrollable bloodlust, reinforcing public fears. The medieval mind, lacking scientific understanding, attributed natural phenomena to supernatural forces. Superstition flourished, and the fear of the unknown, disease, famine, wolves in the woods became intertwined with the image of the werewolf. Visiting the villages where werewolf trials had occurred brought the historical narratives to life. The close-knit communities, surrounded by dense forests, were fertile ground for anxieties to fester and suspicions to grow. Local chronicles often blurred the lines between actual wolf attacks and supposed werewolf sightings, fueling the collective fear. A missing sheep, a mauled villager, all were easily attributed to the supernatural. Oral traditions, passed down through generations, kept the werewolf legend alive. Isabel recognized in these stories the lingering anxieties of a community struggling to understand and control its environment. Alina noted the geographical distribution of werewolf beliefs. Certain regions, particularly those bordering large forests or experiencing social unrest, showed a higher incidence of werewolf accusations, suggesting a correlation between environmental factors and societal anxieties. Thomas's statistical analysis of livestock losses, comparing years with and without werewolf accusations, revealed a subtle but significant pattern. Increased anxiety often coincided with periods of hardship, suggesting that the werewolf served as a scapegoat for economic woes. Isabel concluded that the fear of the werewolf was not merely a superstitious belief, but a manifestation of deeper societal anxieties, fear of the unknown, fear of the wild, and fear of the darker aspects of human nature. These fears, amplified by superstition and circumstance, set the stage for the tragedies to come. Alina knew that understanding the werewolf trials required more than just examining folklore. It meant delving into the legal framework that had condemned so many. The evolution of lycanthropy from a folk belief to a legal crime was a complex process, shaped by the church and secular authorities alike. Thomas, ever the meticulous archivist, had unearthed several key documents. Among them were papal decrees that explicitly condemned lycanthropy as a form of heresy, a direct challenge to God's creation and the natural order. Isabel focused on the psychological dimensions. The Malleus Maleficarum, she explained, provided a theological justification for the persecution of witches and werewolves alike. It framed them as agents of the devil, their transformations a result of demonic pacts. Alina drew their attention to the legal treatises of the time. These texts, she said, defined lycanthropy not just as a sin, but as a crimen exceptum, an exceptional crime that warranted extraordinary measures, including torture to extract confessions. Thomas showed them a disturbing illustration he had found in an old trial record, an accused werewolf being subjected to brutal interrogation by inquisitors. The image was a stark reminder of the methods employed to force confessions. Isabel elaborated on the unreliability of confessions obtained through torture. Under duress, she explained, individuals will often confess to anything to escape the pain, regardless of whether it is true. Alina charted the geographical spread of the Inquisition. While primarily focused on heresy, the Inquisition also played a role in prosecuting alleged werewolves, particularly in regions where its authority was strong. Thomas read aloud from the transcript of a 16th-century werewolf trial in France. The accused, a peasant named Jean Grenier, confessed to transforming into a wolf and attacking several children. The details were gruesome and unsettling. Isabel noted the inconsistencies and oddities in Grenier's testimony. His descriptions are fragmented and fantastical, she observed. They bear the hallmarks of a disturbed mind, perhaps influenced by folklore and suggestion. Alina recognized that the legal definition of lycanthropy as heresy had far-reaching consequences. It transformed a folk belief into a capital crime, justifying the persecution and execution of countless individuals. Thomas carefully archived the documents, mindful of the human cost of the trials. Each page was a testament to the dangers of unchecked power and the manipulation of fear. Isabel concluded, the legal system, meant to protect society, can become a tool of oppression when fueled by fear and superstition. The werewolf trials serve as a chilling reminder of this dark potential. The pieces were there, scattered like fragments of a shattered mirror. Alina felt she was on the verge of seeing a reflection, but the image remained stubbornly unclear. The legal justifications, the folkloric beliefs. Something was missing, a critical lens through which to truly understand the werewolf trials. Thomas entered, his face etched with a mixture of excitement and concern. "Eleanor, I've just finished translating a series of depositions from the Besançon trials. The details are disturbing. The accused spoke of visions, of uncontrollable urges. It goes beyond simple confession." Eleanor knew that they needed an expert in the human mind. She reached out to Dr. Isabelle Morrow, a forensic psychiatrist known for her work on the intersection of mental illness and historical legal practices. Isabelle's perspective would prove invaluable. "Isabelle, thank you for joining us. We've been struggling to understand the psychology behind these accusations," Eleanor said, gesturing towards the stack of documents. "The confessions, the visions, it seems to go beyond simple fear and superstition." "Indeed," Isabelle replied, her voice calm and measured. "We must consider the possibility of underlying conditions. Ergot poisoning, for example, could have caused mass hallucinations. Certain mental illnesses, misinterpreted as demonic possession, could also explain some of the bizarre behavior described in the trials." Thomas, working in the Marburg archives, stumbled upon a detail that seemed to corroborate Isabelle's theory. A local chronicle mentioned a particularly wet summer followed by widespread outbreaks of St. Anthony's fire, a common name for ergotism, just before a surge in werewolf accusations. Eleanor showed Isabelle a passage from the trial of Thies of Kaltenbrunn, who claimed to be a werewolf battling demons in the underworld. "His testimony is so detailed, so vivid. Could this be a manifestation of a specific mental state?" "It's possible," Isabelle mused. "His claims of battling demons could be interpreted as a form of psychosis. Or perhaps he was deliberately crafting a narrative to lessen his punishment, playing into the existing beliefs about werewolves to explain his actions." The specter of coerced confessions also loomed large. Many of the accused were subjected to brutal torture, their wills broken, their words twisted to fit the narrative demanded by their tormentors. How much of what they confessed was genuine belief, and how much was simply a desperate attempt to end the pain? Eleanor felt a chill run down her spine. The picture was becoming clearer, and it was far more complex than she had initially imagined. The werewolf trials were not simply a product of superstition. They were a confluence of belief, fear, mental illness, and the brutal realities of power. "We must proceed carefully," Isabelle said, her voice firm. "We cannot simply dismiss these trials as mass hysteria. We need to analyze each case individually, considering the psychological context, the social pressures, and the potential for misdiagnosis and coercion." The team was now complete. With Eleanor's historical expertise, Thomas's archival skills, and Isabelle's psychological insight, they were ready to delve deeper into the shadows of doubt, to unravel the complex and disturbing truth behind the werewolf trials of medieval Europe. Eleanor began her deep dive into the most infamous of werewolf trials, the case of Peter Stump. The sheer volume of documentation surrounding the trial was staggering, a testament to the morbid fascination it had held for centuries. Thomas, ever the diligent archivist, had located a near-complete set of transcripts from the Stump trial in the Cologne archives. The documents, though fragile, offered a chilling glimpse into the proceedings. Isabelle joined the team, bringing her expertise in forensic psychology to bear on the case. She was particularly interested in the woodcuts depicting Stump's execution, noting the exaggerated features and the clear attempt to demonize him. Eleanor read aloud, He confessed under torture to consorting with the devil, transforming into a wolf and devouring children. The stark words hung heavy in the air. Thomas pointed out inconsistencies in the testimony. Note the phrasing, Professor. It's remarkably similar to other witchcraft confessions of the period. The language seems prescribed. Isabel added, the confession itself is highly suspect. The details are lurid, almost fantastical. It bears all the hallmarks of a confession extracted under extreme duress. Eleanor considered the social context. Stump was a farmer in a rural community facing hardship. Accusations of witchcraft, of being a harmful neighbor, were often leveled against those who were different or vulnerable. Thomas researched the land disputes in the Bedburg region where Stump lived. He discovered evidence of a protracted conflict between Stump's family and a wealthy landowner, a potential motive for the accusations. Isabel raised the possibility of ergot poisoning. The symptoms, hallucinations, paranoia, violent outbursts, could easily have been misinterpreted as demonic possession or lycanthropy. Eleanor understood the brutal reality of medieval justice. Torture was routinely used to extract confessions, regardless of guilt or innocence. The Peter Stump case was no exception. Thomas meticulously documented the specific methods of torture described in the transcripts, the rack, the stripado, sleep deprivation. It was a grim catalog of human cruelty. The team concluded that the case of Peter Stump, while seemingly a straightforward example of werewolf persecution, was far more complex. Fear, social tensions, land disputes, and the brutal realities of medieval justice had all conspired to condemn an innocent man. Eleanor paused, the similarities between werewolf accusations and witch trials becoming increasingly apparent. The accusations often echoed each other, fueled by the same societal fears and prejudices. It was time to delve deeper into this connection. Thomas, ever the meticulous archivist, began cross-referencing trial records, noting instances where individuals were accused of both witchcraft and lycanthropy. The overlap was significant, particularly in regions where religious fervor was high. Isabel pointed out the recurring themes of female transgression. Many accused witches were also accused of consorting with werewolves, further demonizing them in the eyes of the community. The gendered aspect of these accusations was impossible to ignore. Eleanor observed the geographical distribution. Areas with intense witch hunts often saw spikes in werewolf accusations. The two phenomena seemed to feed off each other, amplifying the atmosphere of fear and paranoia. Thomas unearthed a fascinating case in rural France. A family embroiled in a bitter land dispute was targeted with accusations of witchcraft and lycanthropy. The timing was too coincidental to ignore. Isabel identified patterns in the language used to describe the accused. Terms like shapeshifter, devil's pact, and night flyer were frequently used in both witch and werewolf trials, blurring the lines between the two accusations. Eleanor explained to her students that the witch and werewolf trials were, in many ways, a manifestation of the same societal anxieties: fear of the unknown, distrust of outsiders, and the desire to maintain social order through brutal means. Thomas found a series of woodcut prints that further illustrated the interconnectedness of the two beliefs. Witches were often depicted transforming into animals, blurring the line between witchcraft and lycanthropy in the public imagination. Isabel emphasized the role of coerced confessions. Torture often led individuals to confess to whatever crimes they were accused of, regardless of whether they were actually guilty. This further blurred the distinction between witchcraft and lycanthropy. Elinor stood before the village church, contemplating the power of the church in shaping beliefs and fueling the witch and werewolf hunts. Religious dogma played a critical role in demonizing those who were perceived as different or threatening. Thomas carefully transcribed legal passages, noting that the punishments for witchcraft and lycanthropy were often similar, reflecting the perceived severity of both crimes against God and society. Isabel summarized their findings. The witch and werewolf trials were inextricably linked, fueled by the same fears, prejudices, and social tensions. Understanding this connection was crucial to unraveling the complexities of this dark chapter in European history. Elinor meticulously pored over cadastral maps of the regions where werewolf trials were prevalent. She was searching for a pattern, a connection between land ownership, disputes, and the accusations of lycanthropy. Thomas diligently cross-referenced trial transcripts with local land records. His meticulousness was proving invaluable, revealing instances where accusations coincided with ongoing property disagreements. Isabel focused on the political dynamics. She questioned whether certain accusations were orchestrated by powerful figures to eliminate rivals or consolidate control. Elinor highlighted a case from the Alsace region where the accused werewolf was a known opponent of the local lord. The timing of the accusation, coinciding with a period of political unrest, was highly suspicious. Thomas uncovered several instances where family feuds spilled over into accusations of lycanthropy. A bitter inheritance dispute, a slighted honor, these could all provide fertile ground for such charges. Isabel analyzed cases involving vulnerable individuals, the poor, the mentally ill, those with physical deformities. She noted how easily these individuals could become scapegoats, their perceived otherness, making them prime targets for accusations. Elinor discovered evidence of grain shortages and famine coinciding with some of the trials. Accusations of witchcraft and lycanthropy were often used to explain away these hardships, diverting blame from those actually responsible. Thomas found records of bitter disputes over water rights, forests, and grazing lands. Accusations of lycanthropy sometimes arose when one party sought to gain an advantage over another in these resource conflicts. Isabel recognized the role of torture in eliciting false confessions. The vulnerable, desperate to escape pain, would confess to anything, even transforming into a wolf. Elinor began to articulate the social and political context of the trials, emphasizing that the belief in werewolves was often secondary to underlying power struggles. Thomas carefully cataloged the evidence, creating a comprehensive database of cases where accusations of lycanthropy were demonstrably linked to social and political machinations. Isabel concluded that while genuine belief in lycanthropy existed, the trials were, in many cases, a cynical exploitation of societal fears for personal or political gain. Elinor knew that understanding the werewolf trials required a geographic lens. The beliefs surrounding lycanthropy and the legal responses to it varied significantly across Europe. France, Germany, and Switzerland, despite their proximity, offered distinct case studies. Thomas, ever the diligent archivist, had compiled records from various regions. He presented Elinor with comparative summaries of trials from the Vosges Mountains in France, Bavaria in Germany, and the Swiss Alps. The differences were immediately apparent. Isabel, approaching the data from a psychological perspective, noted that the types of accusations differed. In France, there seemed to be a stronger connection to pacts with the devil, while in Germany, the emphasis often lay on acts of cannibalism. Aliner elaborated on the French cases. The werewolves of the Jura Mountains were often described as members of secret societies, engaging in nocturnal rituals and devil worship. This mirrored the broader anxieties surrounding witchcraft prevalent at the time. In Germany, Thomas pointed out, the focus was different. The Bavarian trials often centered on individuals accused of preying on children or livestock. The gruesome details suggested a profound fear of uncontrolled bestial urges. Isabel interjected, noting the potential for ergot poisoning in some of the German cases. The descriptions of violent convulsions and hallucinations aligned with the known effects of consuming contaminated rye. Switzerland, particularly the mountainous regions, presented a unique blend. The legal system was decentralized, with local communities often taking matters into their own hands. Folklore played a significant role, with ancient beliefs in shape-shifting intertwined with Christian dogma. Thomas showed Aliner accounts of village councils enacting their own forms of justice, often based on unsubstantiated rumors and deeply ingrained superstitions. The fear of the wolf, both literal and metaphorical, was palpable. Isabel noted that the Swiss trials were particularly susceptible to coerced confessions. The combination of isolation, fear, and leading questions likely contributed to the conviction of innocent individuals. Aliner observed that the legal definitions of lycanthropy also differed. French law, influenced by Roman legal traditions, tended to frame werewolfism as a form of heresy. German law, on the other hand, focused more on the act of violence, regardless of its supernatural origin. Swiss law was often a patchwork of local customs and interpretations. Thomas meticulously organized the trial records, categorizing them by region and legal jurisdiction. The patterns were becoming increasingly clear. The geography of fear had shaped the werewolf trials in profound ways. Ultimately, Aliner, Thomas, and Isabel concluded that the werewolf trials were not a monolithic phenomenon. They were a complex tapestry woven from threads of folklore, religion, law, and local circumstance. Understanding these regional variations was crucial to unraveling the shadows of doubt that still clung to this dark chapter in European history. After months of relentless research, Aliner felt the weight of the evidence accumulated. The shadows of the werewolf trials were beginning to coalesce into a clearer, albeit more complex, picture. Thomas, ever meticulous, drew Aliner's attention to a recurring phrase in several trial transcripts, a seemingly innocuous detail that might hold the key to understanding the accuser's motivations. Isabel presented her findings on the potential role of ergot poisoning and other mental illnesses, arguing that these factors could have fueled the hallucinations and altered states of mind attributed to lycanthropy. Aliner stressed the importance of considering the socio-political context of the trials. Land disputes, political rivalries, and religious fervor often intersected, creating a fertile ground for accusations and persecutions. Back in the archives, Thomas uncovered evidence of coerced confessions, highlighting the brutal interrogation methods used to extract admissions of guilt from the accused. Isabel argued that many of the accused exhibited symptoms consistent with undiagnosed mental illnesses, further complicating the narrative of demonic possession and lycanthropy. Aliner presented their findings to a captivated audience, challenging the prevailing narratives of mass hysteria and emphasizing the complex interplay of factors that fueled the werewolf trials. Thomas highlighted the importance of examining primary source documents critically, urging historians to move beyond simplistic interpretations and embrace a more nuanced understanding of the past. Isabel connected the historical persecution of the accused werewolves to contemporary issues of prejudice and social injustice, reminding everyone of the dangers of scapegoating and the importance of empathy. Elena reflected on the lasting legacy of the werewolf trials, recognizing them not as isolated incidents of mass delusion, but as a reflection of deeper societal anxieties and power struggles. The echoes of the past resonated within the quiet walls of the archives, reminding Thomas of the enduring responsibility to preserve and understand the stories of those who came before. For Isabel, the study of the werewolf trials served as a stark reminder of the fragility of the human mind and the importance of compassion in the face of fear and misunderstanding.